Hello, this is Ken Forster with Momenta Partners, and welcome to the Enterprise IoT Security webinar. Knowing that there are quite a few people who have registered for this, we're going to wait another minute or two for those people to join, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. Thank you. All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Ken Forster, Momenta Partners, and welcome to the Enterprise IoT Security Connect and Protect. As I said, my name is Ken Forster. I'm the Managing Director for Momenta Partners, and we are connected industry growth partners. First, a little housekeeping. We will be using the BrightTalk platform today. And so, first of all of you who have joined us will be on mute. This will be recorded overall, and so you will have the opportunity to play it back later on. I'd ask that if you have questions during the presentation that you submit them through the BrightTalk tool. You'll see that on your browser, and we will try to get to all of the questions at the end. We will be following up with the deck and with the recordings, as well as curated resources shortly after the presentation. So no need to take copious notes in all of this. So Momenta Partners are digital industry growth partners. We have the industry-leading advisory, so think strategic growth, including M&A and organic growth, executive search, so think key digital industry leaders, and ventures, thinking in terms of investing in disruptors in the space. Since 2012, we've supported over 125 clients with their growth initiatives, including overseeing 2 of the M&A transactions. Placed over 200 key leaders for companies such as United Technologies, C3AI, SAP, and others. And we've invested in over 30 companies with several exits. We like to think of the world we operate as the digital industry ecosystem, with really young disruptors on one end and large leading companies on the other side, and playing a role to bring innovation on both sides. Being a leadership in digital industry overall, including this webinar and others like it, weekly podcasts with industry practitioners, and daily articles that we provide as well. So we'd offer take a look at our website and see some of the other information channels of which we provide, and I think you'll find some very compelling content. Now, we're quite pleased today to feature 3 industry practitioners in industrial IoT security. Julie Fitton, who is with Stanley Black & Decker, a company we've invested alongside of in one case. Duncan Greatwood of Xage Security, a company that we've actually invested directly in, and Nicole Ford, who leads or is the Chief Information Officer for Carrier, and which we've recently placed in position. Now, we have a total agenda of 1 hour. I'm going to take a few minutes up front to really kind of set the context for enterprise IoT security, and then we will turn it over to each of our presenters to talk about enterprise IoT security from their perspective, and hopefully we'll save enough time at the end to discuss and have question or Q&A along the way as well. So again, please make sure you leave any questions along during the presentation on the BrightTalk display. So let's talk a little bit about enterprise IoT security. Now, you'll notice we use the byline connect and protect, and it didn't take long to, for at least one person to come back and say, you really should have those reversed, and you're absolutely right. It was a tongue-in-cheek comment. The reality is this is how most of us have done IoT security. We've connected devices, we've collected data from them, and after the fact, we start to really think about security. And certainly there's been a number of events that have raised the visibility of that as well. What we hope through this presentation is that you think of a way to really reverse them protect and connect. Enterprise IoT security. Momenta likes to sit between what we consider the IT or information technology space and the OT or operational technology space. So we're deep practitioners on both sides, but with deep industry experience. So when we think of what I'll call the DNA, it's devices, it's networks, it's applications in terms of the information stack, but more broadly when we think about this level of security is really holistic security and much wider than traditional data security or IT security might have considered. One, we're looking from the traditional IT domain to the OT domain, so from databases all the way to factory controllers. We're looking from cloud to edge. Think of an analytics platform reaching all the way down to an edge device and collecting data from that. We're thinking about people to devices. IoT, many will say, is simply a way of bringing devices as an actor in an information ecosystem alongside the people that have been there for quite a while. We're also looking holistically across the value chain. So from one's position maybe as an OEM all the way out to clients and customers using your products, or going upstream as well, and then also the life cycle. Much of the equipment that gets put in place in the OT space is 10 to 15 to 20-year assets, and so thinking about how we continue to protect these over the life cycle is absolutely important. So if you take away one thing, Enterprise IoT security is very much talking about a holistic view of security and not a traditional, let's say, data security level. So, of course, there's been a lot of headlines that we've seen in terms of hacks and challenges for connected devices, primarily coming from consumer devices because those were the first to be put out in mass into the ecosystem and really tested some of the technologies and certainly some of the processes and approaches we use to put those out. The good news is we can learn a lot from an industrial IoT perspective of the challenges that have come from there. But when you think about the challenges in the OT space, it's often said that a bug in IT and people are inconvenienced, a bug in OT and people can be injured or worse. And so the vulnerability, if you will, of the devices that we're putting online now is much higher, and the impact potentially of them are as well. Now we can go back to the famous Mirai botnet attack of 2016, which in some sense was a wake-up call for a lot of connected devices, which, with connected refrigerators all, working together to put out a distributed denial of service attack. But if you go back to 2010, this really, the Stuxnet worm, as you may remember, attack of 2010 was the first real shot across the bow from an industrial devices perspective. And while there certainly was an inconvenient side for some foreign governments in this, there was certainly brought a lot of destruction in terms of real equipment and injuries to people. And so you get a sense for the vulnerability and the impact of such attacks there. Now, if we kind of fast forward, say, so that was 2010, 9 years later, we, Forrester Research recently did, in fact, May of 2019, a survey, State of the Enterprise IoT survey, where they interviewed 625 leading corporate governance and risk executives. And some of the findings are eye-opening here. 26% have experienced a data breach caused by unsecured IoT devices. 84% expect a likely data breach caused by an IoT device. 87% believe an IoT-launched attack will be very likely to occur in the next 2 years. 27% say their boards of directors are requiring assurances from them that IoT risk is being assessed, managed, and monitoring. And only 11% say their organizations currently educate employees about risks created by IoT devices in the workplace. So in some sense, you could say we don't know what we don't know about the actual proliferation and or risk profile that we're looking at, but certainly over the 9 years since Stuxnet attack, the opportunities and the challenges continue to exist there. So One of the challenges we see is that there is a gap between IT and OT. IT, of course, traditional enterprise IT CIOs and such, and OT primarily control systems engineers, plant engineers, and the operators that make that up. They're very different cultures, very different tool sets, very different systems vendors. And in IT, you may think Microsoft or Oracle or Salesforce, and OT, you traditionally think Rockwell or Siemens or ABB. And so part of the challenge here is you are dealing with very different use cases and very different people and cultures that are part of that. What's interesting, if you look, unmanaged enterprise IoT devices will be growing to about 18 billion connected devices expected by 2022 per Forrester. Security products, part of the challenge, security products largely are focused on IT, not necessarily OT, and hopefully through this presentation we will give you an example of one that is looking at both. There does tend to be little integration between IT, OT tools and processes and thus security. IT generally is not well versed on understanding industrial systems, and conversely, people who really work primarily on the OT side aren't necessarily aware of security threats or prepared for the impact of security threats and anomalous asset behavior. And part of the challenge is that OT really, when you think of OT security, there's primarily a focus on physical security of remote assets versus cybersecurity of those as well. Now, where there is, of course, where there's challenge, there's opportunity, because we are investors. We obviously look at this space quite closely. What's interesting, if you look at cybersecurity investments and M&A over the last several years, this area has been certainly an attractive area to at least invest in and take a look at. Funding of cybersecurity companies have hit about $5.3 billion in 2018, which is about 81% from 2 years before. M&A deal volume, as you would expect, is up as well. 183 cybersecurity M&A deals, and 90% involving private companies, i.e. these young disruptors in the space. Obviously, there's been an interesting IPO market for this as well. And if you look at the North America, it's been it is continued to be forecast to grow to $248 billion by 2023, so from $167 billion today. So in summary, kind of looking at the IoT security challenge, there's more devices and thus more data coming from those devices. If the coverage or the security periphery or perimeter is now much more than simply IT. It's IT plus OT. It's smart devices that you're building and selling to your clients and having to help your clients manage. It's services across the to better optimize those devices. And it is creating a broader risk profile, so much more holistic view than traditional IT security would look at. Key for that we believe in terms of helping to address this is finding the right talent, and I think you will see in the presentations by the team that finding really key people in terms of chief information security officer roles is absolutely critical, but also leveraging the advanced tools and technologies that a lot of younger companies are bringing into the space, companies including Xage as well. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Julie, who's our first speaker, and let her talk about the world from Stanley Black & Decker's perspective. Julie?
Thank you, Ken, and welcome everybody. I'm Julie Fitton. I lead the digital product security practice for Stanley Black & Decker. You may recognize many of our household brand names like Craftsman, DeWalt, and Black & Decker, of course. But what is lesser known is our digital portfolio. We have a significantly large security business, physical security, cameras, access points, and monitoring solutions. We have technologies that are deployed into hospitals that track both people and assets, and we have deployments in over 14 of the 15 world's top hospitals. We sell fasteners and OT solutions into auto manufacturing and airplane manufacturing with our fasteners. And we are going through a digital transformation in our more traditional tools business and starting to Bluetooth connect tools and capabilities. So what I'd like to share with you today is a bit of a perspective about the new and rising challenges as your traditional business, like ours that's been around for 175 years, starts to migrate into the digital world and begin offering products that are now connected. When you're part of the OT value chain, your customers start to demand place. So in thinking about a connected technology from a manufacturing point of view and from a practitioner's point of view, we start to look at technology as a complex set of layered components, starting with the devices that you see, feel, and touch that get delivered to your factory floors or to your homes that are the connected components. These things are a myriad of different options. It could be asset tracking, sensors, robotics, augmented and virtual reality. Whatever it may be, those devices are gathering data and information from their environments, and those devices may, in fact, be able to be controlled and be mechanical in nature from remote locations, which, as Ken aptly pointed out in the forefront, introduces new layers of risk management of not just the data and information, but also of physical safety for the people who are interacting with the technologies. The next layer to consider is the layer of technology that is collecting the data from these endpoints. And there's lots of ways that IoT accomplishes this step. In some cases, the device itself is directly connected to the internet via cellular, but more often than not, they're using some type of platform, whether it be in an OT environment, some type of exciter that's mounted to the ceiling that the devices are speaking to, or mobile applications that are downloaded to a phone or an iPad of some nature that those sensors and things are gathering data up to. Now, the threat vectors of this layer of the technology stack are very different and really provide for the connectivity between the endpoint and the cloud backend. And that's really the next layer, is the data rationalization point. For most IoT deployments, from, again, a manufacturing point of view, there are all these sensors out in the world collecting information that are brought back into a cloud footprint. At that location, the data is then rationalized, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning gets applied to those data sets, and are drawing various conclusions that are benefiting the end user of those devices in some way. That information then gets rendered back through a web application. So you can see challenges to your cybersecurity program and how you approach applying the traditional cybersecurity mechanisms that really are more focused on the back-end components alongside the programs that are needed for the bridge and gateway components and the endpoints, which introduce a lot of new challenges to your methodologies that you'll be applying in your programs. And to take the theoretical into a more tangible example, I wanted to show you one of our DeWalt tools that's internet connected. So you take a power drill that you're accustomed to seeing around in your garage or on job sites across the globe, and you add a Bluetooth connectivity chip within that that's attached to the battery. It gathers information like the GPS location of the tool that prevents loss management of tools on job sites or from your garage. And that Bluetooth then connects up to get internet connectivity through a mobile app that's downloaded to the consumer's phone. The mobile app also can be the place where the results of the information get rendered. So think of this, we're showing in this view as a single tool. You may own 20 different power tools that are all registered to you, and you can see and manage their battery levels, their GPS locations, and other metadata about the tool right through your mobile app or through a web interface. I think all of us recognize and appreciate that even in a traditional IT environment, there's oftentimes very different teams and very different skill sets that are deploying technology across the various layers Add to that the new domain of firmware and electronics development on the device layer, and you quickly can recognize the complexity that's introduced into your programs. So the approach we're taking at Stanley Black & Decker is to look at the layers and apply the right frameworks at the right place in the technology stack to ensure we're applying cyber will be provided to you later so you can go back and reference some of these industry sources. But Underwriters Laboratory, or UL, has recently come out with a new series of certifications. You likely recognize this seal from the back of your television sets, and it tells you you won't get electrocuted from this television. UL has been around for a very long time, and they've just recently introduced frameworks associated with cyber protection on IoT. ETSI has also released a comprehensive set of cyber practices that are focused on the device and networking layers of IoT. And then at the cloud backends, we have our old reliable solutions of ISO 27001 and SOC 2. But as you might imagine, these frameworks are very complex and comprehensive on the cloud. And as we recognize the challenges associated with product security and the ability to manage cost in the product lifecycle, we look to new and inventive ways to manage the security obligations we have of our cloud backends. So we have turned very heavily to serverless architectures to support our needs for mature cybersecurity capabilities at a very manageable cost. What the serverless architectures are providing for us is reduced compute capability with endless scalability. For example, here on this slide, and this is for example only, real life experiences will be based on usage and capabilities, but for a similar payload across the three different types of deployment options. For serverless, we can run at $19 a month. On a traditional IaaS footprint in the cloud, it would be $300 a month. And if we were to buy a server on-prem, we'd be looking at $30,000 a month. And that's simply just for the compute capability. When we then take that methodology and apply the mechanisms of security operations that need to be compensated for, we start to see an even more compelling explanation for serverless infrastructure from a cost management point of view. In year one, we would be looking at $340,000 of OpEx versus $90,000 of OpEx. And the reasons behind that is that you're outsourcing more of the controls to the cloud provider for cybersecurity, reducing your own operational footprint for what needs to be applied. You're providing for your custom application with only marginal operational costs, and you're maintaining secure cloud configurations and monitoring for abuse. So it really changes that perspective from thinking about cloud operational security toward a cloud configuration management security platform. And that is one of the innovative and creative ways that we are trying to achieve mature cybersecurity practices at a reasonable cost level in the world of IoT. And that brings to a close my section of the presentation. I'd like to now hand it over to Duncan Greatwood. He is the CEO of Xage Security. Duncan?
Hi, Julie. Thanks very much. So yes, I'm Duncan Greatwood, CEO of Xage. Most recently at Apple, where I was running a set of search and differential privacy projects. And previously, I was an email security company acquired by Cisco about 10 years ago. And really what we're working on at Xage is all about how do we secure the foundation for these real-world operations and for the IoT and digital transformations that real-world systems are just beginning right now. Some embarked on it, some just contemplating it. And we would like to create a system that allows the cybersecurity portion to really be a kind of enabler for the complex coordinations that are coming with digital transformation, rather than, as it too often is today, I think, something of an impediment. So let me say a little bit about our direction at Xage. Really, we're aiming to take a situation where today many of the digital interactions in real-world operations are quite uncontrolled, unauthenticated, with no strict authorization, and move to a world where every interaction is controlled and every interaction is protected. So in other words, if employees walk malware onto the floor of a factory, which they inevitably will do from time to time, can that malware say, oh, I'm inside the fence, I'm inside the network, I'm going to jump out into the nearest PLCs that are on my network segment? Or are the systems required to authenticate and prove, hey, yes, I'm allowed to reprogram that PLC? Typically, if you can control those interactions, then you'll actually stop the malware from jumping from a laptop or an iPhone into the equipment on the floor. And we're applying these techniques across a fairly broad range of industries, but particular progress in utilities, oil and gas, green energy, manufacturing, and then some pretty cool kind of smart mobility applications as well. So let's take a look at the kind of landscape that we're dealing with here. So digital transformation, of course, has multiple aspects, and we are seeing customers deploying real AI and real analytics, both in the edge and in the cloud, as Julie said. We're seeing rich applications where supply chain partners are sharing data both between their operations, so edge to edge, and often via the cloud too. So this creating kind of multi-party collaborations and optimizations that were never possible before. And where this evolves down to is into a situation where really you kind of have a many-to-many connectivity. So rather than a world of isolation where individual subsystems of an industrial operation or a real-world operation are largely separated from the rest of the universe, suddenly we're finding many things talking to many things. And, of course, that leads us to the question of Xage, which is how do we create real security when everything is protected in this fashion and allow people, operations, devices, applications, or to do that in particular in a world where so many identities in the system are unmanaged and many devices, IoT devices, may have no password or default passwords, and where the nature of the interactions are often complex and may even be unknown perhaps to the customer who's lost track of quite what is going on inside their operational systems. And how do we do that in the face of really a rising tide of attacks? And you'll be familiar with some of the stories about how Russian hackers broke into the US electrical grid over the last 18 months. That's a very real threat, but we just deployed last week at a wastewater facility in a 50,000 person town, which they'd been sensitized to some of these issues because their wastewater facility had been hacked by an Iranian hacker. So the days where people could kind of assume it won't happen to them, I think are rapidly coming to an end. Let me talk a little bit about how we solve this very grand problem of the many-to-many interactions that we need to protect. And I'll talk about the Xage approach, but actually many of the lessons of Xage I think would apply quite broadly whether a user was a Xage customer or not. So how do we deploy? We deploy by putting software right inside the industrial operation, on the factory floor, in the substation, at the wind farm, in the oil refinery. And we deploy multiple software nodes, and this is important because it's one of the techniques we use to make sure that there is no single point to hack in the system. Now, I think for real-world operations, that is a super important aspect of protecting the system. You just have to assume that some devices will get compromised, the network will be penetrated. And so how do you protect in practice when you have a partial compromise going on? And the way we do it is we share the data, the policies, and we tamper-proof them amongst these multiple nodes. And then we use replication techniques to make sure that passwords, identities, access control policies are protected right the way from the corporate center down all the way onto the on-site facility, whatever that might be. And we will essentially change a situation where getting onto the network is enough to access equipment and systems into a world where it's much more similar to corporate IT world, where you have to authenticate yourself against the system, and then you'll be granted access to the machines or the applications that you should have access to. I'd like to quickly look at 3 example use cases. So the first one is probably the simplest, which is securing access for a wind farm. And so here we deployed at one of the biggest wind farm operators in the world, and we are now protecting every device that they have on their farms, from the transformers to the HMIs and everything in between. Technicians who used to have to travel to sites are now able to open up access remotely and authenticate as themselves. They'll be granted access to the devices they should have access to, the ones they've been trained on, and they're able to do a lot more work remotely, and there's no longer a whole ton of unmanaged identities sitting on HMIs or on other systems on site. So the Xage system is able to take control of all of those things. So we're able to both make it much more convenient for the users with single sign-on to manage the system much better from an IT perspective as well. A second example is a refinery example where we are deployed in the refinery and in the suppliers to the refinery. Both sides of this diagram are sharing data into an Azure cloud. And we are not only managing access to machines and applications here, but also guaranteeing the integrity of that data. And so the suppliers to the refinery are doing real-time optimization, for instance, changing the mix of catalysts that they supply for use in a distillation column in the refinery. And here the Xage fabric is not only protecting the systems, but it's also acting as a system of record, a tamper-proof audit log that ultimately the suppliers and the refinery will use to decide how much the suppliers get paid, depending on how well they were able to optimize the refinery's processes. And our third example here is an example that actually ComEd, the utility in Chicago, recently announced publicly, where they're using Xage to protect the interactions within and between electrical microgrids. So these are local power distribution systems and power production and consumption systems, with people having solar panels on the roofs of their buildings and so on. And energy is being traded here locally. So it's the Xage fabric is providing a continuum of protection all the way from protecting individual machines and sensors, protecting the data from those sensors and forwards between the different components. So to summarize, I think what we're aiming to do at Xage, and I think what many operators should aim to do as well, is to protect every system, control every interaction, and at that point, you really have the ability to have a secure real-world operation as opposed to one that's exposed to attack. With that, I'd like to pass over to Nicole, who's VP and CIO at Carrier. Thank you, Nicole.
Good afternoon and welcome. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Carrier Corporation, a division of United Technologies. We are #1 in the marketplace in many segments such as residential, HVAC, and home and fire detection, with iconic brands like Linnell, company with 55,000 people. Several years ago, we started down the IoT journey by connecting our products in the home and in buildings around the world. We expect the best for our employees, best for our customers, and the best for our shareholders. Best for our employees by providing an inclusive work environment that fosters collaboration and teamwork. Best for our customers by making ourselves easier to work with and partner with, by being authentic and providing the best technical solutions to meet their greatest challenges. We are planning by being forward-thinking in the development of not only our products but our people. One of the things to note is believe that security by design safe environment as a focus when designing IoT and operations and risk mitigation. So one of our focus areas a couple of years ago was to connect our products to make it easier for the businesses that consume our products and for the buildings. Connected product security has been a major focus for Carrier's cybersecurity program. As the Chief Information Security Officer, I'm not only responsible for enterprise cybersecurity, but also for products. Products will involve more connectivity with service providers, clients, and with consumers. This holistic approach to security here at Carrier is extremely important to make sure that we build trust. We are planning for every phase of product delivery and customer experience. We are building our program and our information security strategies around services that are near and dear to our customers. Connected services will provide additional annualized revenue streams that we have not been able to leverage previously. And so we involve the appropriate stakeholders from all of our business units. It's important that we have cross-functional teams of people that are helping us design our products and to make sure that they're trained appropriately and understand how to interweave cybersecurity controls into our products. Considered previously developed product security principles. We have a set of security principles and guidelines that all of our engineering teams understand, and we have product security teams that work side by side with them to make sure that we're using and leveraging those principles as we're designing our products through the product development lifecycle. Aligned with strategy with industry-leading frameworks to lend further agility. That's really important to note because, as Julie mentioned, we use best-in-class security frameworks, ISO 27000 and NIST, and we are also looking at certifications like the UL certification that's just come out as well. We've developed service capabilities and service definitions. I think it's important for us to really align on what those definitions are across our business and to make sure that everybody is aware of those capabilities. Define an organization to build defined capabilities through roadmap projects and initiatives. One of the things my team is really focused on is making sure that we have a cybersecurity roadmap for all of our connected products for the next 3 to 5 years. And we revisit those roadmaps to make sure that as we see additional threats enter or we find out about additional threats, we ensure that the roadmap takes into account additional security controls to combat those. Okay. So these are our 6 principles that we believe are really important and really have helped us as we've gone down our journey for product security maturity. One being define coordinated cross-functional security organization. We believe that you have to have a good mix of engineering and cybersecurity professionals working hand in hand to make sure that our products are safe and secure. I think because it's a new discipline, making sure that we have the right expertise and the people involved is extremely important because they both and the ability for hackers to infiltrate our products. So working in these cross-functional groups really help us to ensure that we're looking at all facets of our products, the design of our products, and how attackers can attack them. Secure by design principles are extremely important to us as well. We try to weave that into our product development lifecycle as much as possible. We have control gates throughout every portion of the life cycle, where we do things like threat modeling, we do risk assessments, we'll do some penetration testing as well. And it's all really just modeled as a part of the product development life cycle. And as we find things, we deal with them during the design phase while we're still designing the product instead of at the end after the product has already been built. So that's really, really important, is to make sure to weave security into the fabric of the product development life cycle so that by the end of, as you're developing, you're able to catch issues that may crop up, and then you can deal with them then. Secure end-to-end solution development. Again, this talks a little bit about that secure by design. I think it's important to note that whether we're developing our product or we're developing what we consider a digital product, that as secure SDLC is extremely important. Identity management access controls. We believe that identity access management is key and critical. And we make sure that as we're developing our products that we take that into account up front. Standardized operating processes are really important. We have different product lines, as I stated before. Carriers in the HVAC business, fire security and safety business, and we're also in refrigeration. So those are vastly different types of products, but making sure that we have standard processes across those product lines is extremely important. And we really take the time to make sure that those processes can cut across all of our different products. Secure product lifecycle and obsolescence. This is always a challenge for everybody in our industry, is legacy products. And these are products that weren't designed with security in mind, but they're still on the market. Typically, when you think about the life cycle of an air conditioner runs for about 30 years. So thinking about that, we have to think about how do we patch that device on air, right? And how do we, put in mitigation controls in place for devices that weren't, built or designed with cybersecurity in mind. And so that's something that we are really focused on, is how do we attack our legacy devices just to make sure that we're providing the best and most safe customer experience we can. Okay. Again, the risks presented to organizations because of IoT can't truly be quantified. However, with planning and regular testing of environments, you can have a manageable risk tolerance. My team has created a short list of quick wins to show value and progress across the organization. We started with basics and foundation, enabling unique credentials for each device. While this is a bit consuming from the start, once a cadence was established, it became simple and a significant way to reduce risk. Third-party risk is and will continue to be a major factor for us, not only with our contractors and service providers to our company, but also from sources of our raw materials. We needed to validate that we were obtaining parts and technologies from reputable sources during the manufacturing process. Our third-party risk management program was overhauled with a focus on future connectivity concerns. But as basic as it sounds, ensuring network isolation became a quick win as well. Certain business units had to make changes, but overall it was relatively seamless effort. A lot of credit goes to all the many talented colleagues that I work with here at Carrier. Okay. And to kind of sum it up, at the end of the day, we're living in a connected world, and it is our job to enable our products with security capabilities to manage risk to an acceptable level. This is not an afterthought at Carrier. We are planning by building a solid IoT foundation today. I will pass it back over to Ken Forrester for key takeaways and the Q&A section. Ken?
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you all for obviously a great presentation in terms of both the content and the flow of it. It's been really informative. It's very difficult to follow up on that and to try to think about the key takeaways, and so and I've kind of summarized them as one, think global. Enterprise IoT security is holistic. It's IT to OT, it's cloud to edge, it's people to devices across the full value chain and across the full 30-year life cycle of these devices as well. It's a much bigger problem set and perimeter than I think we'd ever considered in the past. Act local. Enterprise IoT security is, as Nicole said, is security by design. You must have the right people, the right tools. The idea is not to connect and protect, but do it the other way around, to protect and connect these devices. Grow organically. We have a thesis, an investment thesis within Momenta that says brown is the new green, and what it means is brownfield applications is where the money is at, just because people are not going to rip and replace. And I love to hear the team talking specifically around it must be relevant today, i.e., unprotected devices, legacy devices that are there now, as well as relevant to tomorrow, the greenfield applications that we all look forward to. And so the idea that in Xage's case, they cover existing systems and they cover new use cases is absolutely critical to this as well. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the team for Q&A. And the good news is we have a lot of questions. So let me go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to start with Nicole. So some of the more, let's say, well-known breaches have happened because of unsecure HVAC connections often. The Target one comes to mind. And thankfully, I understand those were not carrier systems. How do you ensure that the security of your devices go all the way out to helping your customers be more secure using those devices and your services as well?
Yeah, thank you, Ken, for that question. So carriers invested heavily in technologies like Secure Boot and SSL certifications or certificates to ensure that and unique credentials, right? That's one of the areas, is making sure that people can't tap into our systems and use that as a beachhead to get into other building systems. And so, by leveraging unique credentials, SSL certs, we have been able to mitigate that risk.
Very good. The next question is for Duncan. Duncan, what emerging technologies do you think will be game changers for the enterprise IoT security space?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. So I would probably highlight two. I think one maybe obvious, one probably less obvious. So I think the obvious one is that the rise of edge computing is going to be very important for these real-world situations, whether it's handling real-time manufacturing optimization or whether it's maintaining customer confidentiality in a microgrid. There's a great deal that has to happen, right where the machines are. And that, of course, is being combined with shipping a ton of data back to the cloud, where there's a little bit more time and more processing capability. And, the growth of cloud and edge go together with the poor old mid-tier corporate data center getting hollowed out in the middle. So I think that's one thing that's important for us and for many of our customers. The less obvious technology, which we're finding to be very, very powerful, is actually in the hope of becoming more secure. But what blockchain does for us is that it is the most distributed, the most tamper-proof, and the most powerful for replication, and the most redundant data structure that we can adopt. And so in all of our deployments to date, we have used blockchain to protect the underlying fabric and to tamper-proof things like security policies so they can't be changed in an invalid way, to tamper-proof financial records even for microgrids. And so one of the ways that we can achieve this no single place to hack effect is by actually underpinning some of these systems with a blockchain. And the customer often doesn't know a very powerful technique for tackling these distributed.
Julie, Nicole had talked a bit about how she designs in security from the beginning in the earliest product processes. I guess give me a sense from your team how you are and how early in the design process you're actually involved in new product design.
Sure. Our program, Digital Product Security, cannot be successful without close and tight partnerships with our product development teams. We've established an overarching governance model called our Digital Product Security Council, which gives us those ongoing dialogues and conversations with our key product stakeholders on a continual basis. And as a result of those partnerships and the driving of collaborative standards and policies across the company, we then partner very closely to come into the product lifecycle at the earliest stages at ideation, in most cases, where product teams are trying to understand what their threat models and threat vectors even might be, because this is really new ground for them. So they embrace the consultative approach that we take to cybersecurity in product development, and it results in solid solutioning like the serverless architectures that, if designed up front, can introduce very solid compute and capability security. Again, cost is always a factor in all of these things. So, that's really how our business stakeholders see the value in our engagement, and not just see it as an obligation and a check-the-box measure that is required in their life cycle and phases and gates. It's more of a partnership.
Thank you. This is actually a Momenta question. We place a lot of chief digital officers, and what we've noted is that the next team built out right behind him is chief information security officer, which both of you are. What are the key traits of successful CISOs that are out there? And this is for Julie and Nicole. So,
well,
I can
think.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, yeah, no, go on, Julie.
So I really think it's some of the primary traits are flexibility, creativity, and the ability to stay calm in crisis mode. And I think those are traits that have been necessary from the beginning of time in cybersecurity. I think it's been a unique evolution of the discipline in that it was born out of necessity. There was never pull yourself up by your bootstraps and figure it out kind of problem. And I think that those three traits that I mentioned are things that have served me well throughout the growth of my career in cyber.
Nicole, anything to add?
Yeah, I think you have to be a really good facilitator too. I think in the past, I think CISOs have been portrayed as, the person that says no, or, the king of no. I've heard so many different kind of like names in the past, but I think in general, you have to be a really good facilitator. You have to understand your role, and you have to be of value to the business. So you look at the business as your customer, and you understand how your business runs, and then how to secure or provide secure solutions to support that business. I think that's important. Obviously you have to be able to play the political game, and you have to have really good business acumen, because you have to be able to sell cyber in some ways. But I think overall, being a good facilitator, understanding how to meet people in the middle is pretty important.
Excellent. Duncan, given your pioneering work at Apple, what attracted you to Xage in the OT security space? It seems like a big conceptual jump.
Sure. Well, I think it's perhaps less of a jump than people might think. In the last 10 years, we've seen a ton of innovation in mobile, social media, and so on, and that will continue. But I do think that the next 10, even 20 years of innovation are likely to be focused on these real-world operations that we would define of managing the energy grid. And so I think that, what perhaps in the past was a more slow-moving situation, and, still, even today, needs to be handled carefully, is going to be really a kind of maelstrom of innovation over the next decade. And, I think that cybersecurity in industrial is really a fundamental enabler. It's not just what I think of as the spackle companies. There's a hole in the wall, I'll run forward to my spackle and fill it in. That's the old kind of security company. But with a more holistic approach, we can actually make it better as well as making it more.
Another one from the audience. Do you think that the best IoT security solutions will be delivered by specific dedicated IoT security companies, or will it be done by the giants of cybersecurity? And this one is for the team, so whoever wants to jump in.
I suppose it would be sort of obvious to say it's going to be a bit of both, honestly. There are customer situations where we see where the existing vendors kind of got them into trouble and may not be very motivated to get the customer out of trouble again. But in other cases, we work very closely with some of the big vendors you mentioned at the beginning of the call, Ken, and they can be, on their best days, they can be super forward-looking and thoughtful about how they're addressing issues. So I think we're more often challenged with the gaps between vendors than we are with, incumbents slowing down the process here.
Okay. Julie, one for you specifically. How do you keep up to date on new technologies, threats as a security professional?
It's really industry engagement and keeping an ear to the street for us. I think also it's listening to our stakeholders and the direction that they're taking some of their new solutioning. So security is always a follower to the technology advancements, right? We try and be as close behind the technology advancements as we possibly can be, but nonetheless, the technology comes first, the new ways of solutioning, the new challenges, and security comes hot on its heels trying to solve the problems of the abuse cases that are new and inherent in what is being invented in some of these new spaces. And things are moving very fast. And I think, to the earlier question about what are the traits that are valuable to the CISO, it's that flexibility in thinking and not just following inherent frameworks for the sake of frameworks that are based on what we knew and understood yesterday, but applying the principles of those frameworks to new circumstances and solutions to stay ahead of the curve and continue to innovate and be that true partner to the technology developers of your business while protecting the company and maintaining that level of quality and assurance that our customers expect from us.
Okay. And this one will be the final question, I believe, given that we only have about 2 minutes left. And I will just go in the order, Julie, Duncan, and Nicole for answering. Are we better prepared today than we were 9 years ago when Stuxnet hit?
I think at a minimum, we're much more aware than we were years ago that these things are possible. And having that presence of mind around the problem set is the first step to finding solutions and truly being prepared. Duncan?
I think it's clear we are better prepared, but I'd say that the acceleration in the threat has outrun the improvements in security. So at this point, we're probably more challenged, and I do believe that over the next few years, we'll kind of catch up with ourselves a little bit and hopefully get ourselves to a better place.
I think we're better informed. As Julie stated, I think we understand the challenge that we face, and I think the technology is out there. I think that there's still a need to kind of justify the cost of applying these technologies. And there's still a little bit more education that I think is still required. So I think, are we better prepared? I think we have the combination. Everything is there, all the ingredients. We just need to put them together. And I think over the next few years, we'll definitely see our preparedness will continue to increase.
So Julie, Duncan, and Nicole, thank you so much for your insightful perspectives on enterprise IoT security. Again, this is Ken Forster, Managing Director for Momenta Partners, and it's been our pleasure to bring you this webinar. We will follow up with a link to the recorded webinar and the presentation and the materials that go with it. And for those questions we didn't get to, we will try to individually come back with answers on that as well. So with that, thank you so much. Have a great day, and we look forward to the next Momenta webinar. Take care.